be glad you're not having to try to do this through having watched it on YouTube after the fact. Are there any changes, enhancements, additions, or whatever to our notes from the 28th? Hearing none, do I have a motion to
So moved.
approve?
So
Second?
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Aye. Aye, thank you.
Abstain.
Great. That over there. Okey doke. I thought it might be a good idea for us to talk a little bit about, and get feedback from you all on the meeting that we had with the select board on the 28th, to see what comments you may have. And then after that, Lowry and I can talk a little bit about a follow-up meeting we had with Bob Falciani, because we wanted a few more specifics from what they were saying in the meeting. So those of you that were there, do you have any comments and thoughts from the session we had on the 28th? Karen?
Other than the fact that this discussion, which went on a long time, about town meeting, form of government and all that, which was not part of the charter, I found that to be a little disappointing. I thought this type of conversation could be on hold until we actually discuss the charter. I have nothing else. If we do it again with the select board, I'd like to have us stay on message and talk about the charter first.
Good point. I know that the topic of form of government is really sort of what's in the front of some of their heads.
Right.
Anybody else have some comments about how it went? Jim's not here yet, I don't think.
I could just add a couple things.
Sure.
One is that this whole discussion about how do we educate citizens about how the town government works is not part of our task.
Exactly.
Perhaps that's another task for the select board and maybe the board of realtors, the chamber of commerce, something like that.
Mhm.
We need, I agree completely with Karen, we need to remain focused. It's not up to us to teach people how the government works. That's not our function. And that just distracts us and drags us into these half-hour-long conversations that really are not our responsibility. So I would encourage everyone to avoid those in the future.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I think we should make the point is that some members of the select board were all excited that they were going to send us all these written comments and questions and emails and everything else. We should note that we received nothing from them in writing.
Yes.
We've received no comments whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think as a result of that, when Lowry and I talked to Bob Falciani to have some follow-up, the suggestion was that when we schedule the next session with them, that we ask for their comments, to have a list from them in advance and give them a date. So number one, we could do any preparation that we may need, but also that might keep them on task. If we tell them, okay, these are the articles we're going to talk about at the next meeting. So, please send us in advance any questions you may have. And that might help the meeting move along a little bit as well.
Mhm.
Hi, Jim. Welcome. Hi,
Hello,
Jim
Deb.
Hurd.
Bob, Karen,
Mark,
Mark,
I was at,
Jean, and who's that guy?
Stiff.
it's actually not Lowry. It's just a photograph of him and somebody else is behind the photo.
Yeah, I rent this out to the football stadiums and they place it in the seats in the weekends.
Jim, I
Yes, ma'am.
was just asking if anybody had any specific feedback they wanted to give from our meeting on the 28th with the select board.
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Somebody has a dog that's hungry. Well, let's talk, Lowry and I can talk a little bit about our meeting with Bob. We requested it because I thought that in some respects, comments from the select board were vague. They kept saying that they just felt like the charter was restrictive. And they couldn't do things they wanted to do, but they really didn't say 1, 2, 3, what was it?
Right.
So Lowry, do you want to pick up from there?
Yeah, I think it was, Deb and I met with Bob for maybe 45 minutes. We met in person, and all three of us are still walking around, so that's good. One of the things we talked about was that some of the members of the select board had indicated that they felt that they wanted to have more powers to act a little bit independent of a town meeting should there be another virus type emergency in town. And Bob actually shared with us that they had citizens come to them and business tenants and businesses come to them and say, you need to go talk to my landlord and get them to forgive my rent. Well, and I mean, the select board doesn't have the capacity or the legal authority to do that. So I think that they were pummeled with lots of stuff that they never expected to deal with while being a select person. Mm-hmm. And when we got down to it, one of the things that we have learned by reading through these other charters and reviewing them with Bill Kelly is that in the town meeting form of government, you're really playing with fire if you try to make the select board into a legislative body, because they are not. And the opinion, as we're going to talk about later, is that any challenges to that would not hold up in a court. So what Bob finally said was that he felt that what they really needed was some flexibility in, I might not have the terms right, some flexibility in applying some surplus funds to one task or another to make it better for people, not paying rent, not doing that kind of stuff, but other things that might be helpful for the town. And that I think Bob said he believed that they could accomplish that through a policy change in the select board. And the select board is free to change their own policies from time to time as they see fit. So that basically we didn't really need to do anything to give them greater flexibility than what they had now. Is that your memory, Deb?
That's my reading of it. Plus, we even brought up the select board contingency fund that's in the budget every year. And in this budget cycle, the budget committee and the select board increased their contingency fund from what had been, I think, around $40,000 to $160,000. And that's a contingency fund that the select board could use, and they don't need anything in the charter for them to be able to expend that money.
Right.
So sort of some of my take is that they were, I think, looking to the charter when they didn't need to be looking to the charter for more authority. Karen.
Is there any wiggle room in any of those foundations or trust funds that we have that the select board can make decisions to assist businesses that are on hard times? Or has it ever been suggested to them to look at it?
That wasn't discussed with him. I mean, most of those are fairly specific as to what types of folks or what needs they can address. And you really start running into a slippery slope. You know, if the select board, and it's not the select board's determination, it's the, I forget the name of the committee that doles out the money. It's their decision. Mm-hmm. If they decide to give $500 to business A, but turn down business B, I mean, you're really creating problems for yourself, I think. So that wasn't discussed at all.
The other issue is a lot of these trust funds have all kinds of qualifications about how that money can be used. Mm-hmm. So I really think that it's the contingency fund that could have been used. So one of the things you got, and I did it by email, and maybe this is a good time to address this one because I sent it kind of late. And it was some language as a result of the meeting with Bob. And since we're talking about flexibility on money and voting on money, one of the things they were faced with was not being able to have an open town meeting to vote on the budget. So they went ahead and put it on the ballot, even though strictly speaking, our charter doesn't say that they have the option of putting the budget on the warrant to be voted on by secret ballot. So I cribbed some language and thought perhaps if they had a problem with not being able to have a town meeting, if we have another pandemic and there's a lockdown, meaning you can't have the meetings, can't have meetings, the language at the very end, it would certainly have to go to Bill Kelly. But rather than trying to create a whole section of language in the case of a civil emergency declared by the government, the select board can put the budget on the warrant, but then we'd have to have a way for them to have public hearings on it. So did you all get that email, and were you able to read that section? Bob, did you not get it in the mail? Okay, let me read this to you, if that's okay. If the annual town meeting is not held by the beginning of the new fiscal year, and the proposed budget is not approved by the beginning of the new fiscal year, the final budget figures for the immediately preceding fiscal year for ongoing municipal services only shall be deemed effective to permit expenditures until the final budget is adopted, and then to be charged against the new budget, but only to the extent reasonably sufficient to cover necessary expenses to maintain the normal operations of town government and services. In other words, you can keep operating using the budget from last year until you're able to hold a town meeting and have a vote. This is what Kennebunk does, because they vote on secret ballot. And if for some reason the town budget gets voted down on the secret ballot, they have to have language in order to keep operating until they can hold another vote on a revised budget. So that's why they have this language. Mark.
Yeah, but I thought that was discussed with Bill Kelly, and he said that this was covered under state statute under the emergency acts. So that we could continue under previous year's budget if something happened.
You could be right, and I don't remember that.
Maybe it was a discussion we had at the budget committee meeting. Because
that's probably where you had it.
Towards the end of the budget committee meeting, we were most of the way through our budget when the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
We actually had our final meeting by Zoom, which was very difficult, and we were just new to them at that point in time. And that was one of the things that came up was, what if we don't pass a budget? And it came up that it could be continued under the previous year's budget.
Well, that's really interesting. So I wonder if the question is, do we even need the language in the charter, or would it be a good idea to have it if it is already allowed because of the state declaration?
Excuse me. When we were reviewing this, Deb, when I was reviewing the language, the language that I think Mark's right. There is a statute in the states, MRSA, whatever. But what it says is it talks about for emergency services in the town. And our thought was, wait a minute, if there's something for whatever reason, there's a power outage, we can't vote on the budget that night, all of the normal services in the town should continue, not just emergency services. Because emergency services are typically, fire, police, EMT, that kind of stuff. But if for whatever reason this gets delayed by a week, people still need to come in and get dog licenses. They need to come in and update their car registration, all the everyday activities that happen in the town. And that's why we changed the language a little bit.
That's right.
To say that to maintain the normal operation of the town. And this way too, if for whatever reason the vote goes to the floor and there's a big squabble and people don't agree, that we can continue as a town while we work out those details. So this is a little bit more more general in term than the state's standard was, because the state standard said emergency services only, and we need to keep all of the basic functions of the town going on.
So what do you guys think about, oh, yes, Karen?
I think that this section that you just read out here, that I'm looking at on my other computer, is entirely appropriate to put into the charter as long as you're certain that it's not going to bump up against any state statutes put us in a bad spot. But from what Lowry just said and you said, it doesn't sound like it would, and I don't think it hurts to put it in the charter.
Okay, and
Agreed.
Agreed. Well, I'll run it up the Bill Kelly flagpole
Okay.
and see what reaction he has. And this could go, in the budget section.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping that this would keep us from having to put in all kinds of other clauses about the option of putting the budget on secret ballot. But we'll see. And if we get this in, it'll be interesting to see what the select board thinks about it. And one of the other things we talked about with Bob was the language about select board forfeiting their position if they miss X number of meetings. If you
Mhm.
remember, the select board reacted to that in the meeting we had with them. I think Taylor said he thought it was okay, but a couple of other people kind of worried about it. So we did talk to Bill Kelly about it. And so we have currently, they forfeit their role as a select board if they fail to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings in a fiscal year without an excused absence. And then the select board votes on it, and they have to have a finding that the written request was reasonable. So we proposed a couple of options, and this was one actually that Bob Falciani preferred, that it be 3 regular meetings in a fiscal year, not necessarily 3 consecutive meetings, but 3 meetings within the fiscal year that are unexcused.
Mhm.
One of
No.
the other option is a couple of towns have this one, where a member fails to attend 25% of the regular meetings of a board within 6 months. And in our case, that would be 3 meetings in 6 months. And the other option I proposed was it be members fail to attend 3 regular meetings in a fiscal year without being excused by the chair of the select board. Because if you remember correctly, there was some squeamishness about the select board having to vote. If you remember that from the meeting.
Yeah.
And somebody made the comment, well, they would prefer doing it by peer pressure, not having to take some kind of vote that somebody had been absent, in an unexcused way. And this is sort of appealing to the people that may be squeamish about it, saying that the chairman of the select board is the one that deals with deciding if the excuse is valid. So what do you guys think?
If you want to put anything in there at all, I would be more in favor of option.
I'd like to err on the side of making it more.
Wait, Karen hold on, I'll get back to you. That was you, Jim. I'll get back to you
Sorry.
after Karen.
I was saying if we have to put this in here, then I'm most in favor of option 3.
Which is the chairman of the select board.
Or a member fails to attend 3 regular meetings in fiscal year without being excused by the chair.
Of the select board.
Yeah. The factors should be considered. I think putting in the factors should be considered really is more of a comfort
Yeah.
zone for whoever making that decision, that they don't feel that they're kind of going in deep water without true guidance. I think that gives them some real guidance.
Okay. Jim?
Karen, would you repeat that?
What? Second, did you get
What option you favor?
option 3? Option 3. It says a member fails to attend 3 regular meetings in a fiscal year without being excused by the chair of the select board. Factors to be considered shall include, but not limited to, attendance record, circumstances beyond the control of the absent member, professional or family commitments, illness or medical treatments. The reason for the excused absence shall be made part of the record of the meetings missed by the member. I think spelling out the possibility of the factors really puts the chair of the select board in a more solid place about making decisions like this.
Mark, you had your hand up.
Yeah, playing devil's advocate here. What if it's the chairman that's missing the meetings?
Oh, there you go.
Total devil's advocate there. How about if you?
Well, then it would be,
Or vice chairman,
okay, in
Yeah,
the absence of.
two
yeah.
people that could make that decision.
That's a good point. Jim, did you want to react to what
I
Karen was
just-
saying?
I just would like to tighten it up. 3 absences in a year seems like an awfully long period of time. And remember that this comes about from someone who was missing meetings almost every meeting. And they didn't know what to do. It was a planning board issue. They didn't know what to
Yeah.
do about it.
Mhm.
So in a whole year, if you miss 3 consecutive meetings, how difficult is that to, what I want to say, control?
Yeah, this isn't consecutive. It's regular
Yeah,
meeting.
that's-
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also saying unexcused meetings. If they've got an excuse, they can miss whoever knows how many meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
So Jim, you're thinking that 3 in a year is too generous?
Too generous.
Bob
Mhm.
Bob Oxton, where are you on this? Hold on, I have to unmute you. Hold on. You're muted. Did you mute your own? There you are.
Okay,
Bob,
I'm sitting here thinking about this, and I think also that 3 meetings in a year, unexcused, is kind of stretching it a little bit. I think the 3 meetings in a row come better in there, but I know some people have missed a lot of meetings in the past.
Well, to that question, what if it said 3 unexcused absences during any 6-month period?
Mhm. That's good too.
That
Yeah,
tightens it.
I like that.
Yeah, but I would like to see those options spelled out like they are in section, in option.
Oh,
three.
yeah. Explain
keep
what,
all the factors.
explain what it is, but I'm thinking that because if you agreed to be on the select board, you had to know what the schedule was ahead of time,
Mhm.
and you had to be willing to, if you're going to give up your softball game or something to be there, you had to be willing to make that choice.
So that really would be kind of like option 1, or a member fails to attend 3 regular meetings in any 6-month period without being excused by the select board. An absence shall be excused by an affirmative vote of a majority of the others present. And the factors to be considered shall include blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
So it's option 1 with the time frame changed.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Jim,
Yes.
Jim Hurd, does that
I'm
sound a
fine
little
with
tighter?
that.
Hmm?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Jean,
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
And if we go with option 1, we also respond to Mark's comment about what if the absent person's the chairman?
Yeah.
yep, so it's the okey doke. Should we have a motion and a vote since this is a change to the charter?
I'll move.
Second,
I make a motion that we approve option 1.
With the change to in any 6-month period,
Right.
correct?
Right. And the additional
The factors.
wording from option 3.
Okay, the factors are in option 1, so it's the last sentence, so it's still there. Okay, all those in favor? Aye,
aye,
Aye.
opposed, 7-0, great. Thank you all. The last thing on this November 13th proposed language, we did chat with Bob about budget committee because that was sort of one of the sources of frustration, it appeared, to some degree. And Bob made the comment that he thought tell me if you think I'm wrong, Larry, that the role of the budget committee wasn't clear. And I reread our language, the current language that we have, and I'm not so sure it isn't clear what the budget committee's role is. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think what Bob was saying in a very polite way was that the role of the select board during the budget committee meetings was unclear, because the intent was that the select board be there to answer questions that the budget committee may raise, or from time to time interject a question into their discussion, not to take over the conversation. And so that's kind of a management issue rather than a charter issue to do that. And one of the things we talked about too is that Deb rounded up all these other charters from other towns for us to read. In the 5 that I read, there were 0 budget committees in any of those towns. The budget was very clearly to be developed by staff in the town. The finance director, the town manager, the town administrator, whoever it was that ran all that operations in conjunction with all the various department heads. So I think that if we can get it back to where we were going, where we have a smaller budget committee, they review all the stuff, they have their meetings, they make their recommendations are known to the voters. And I think we're fairly close to where we want to be, I think.
Karen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just a little history on how this all came to be with the select board sitting in on the budget committee meetings. Years ago, and I sat on the budget committee, I think, for 11 years, we would hear presentations from various managers and others. And then if we said no, they got the opportunity to present again to the select board separately, because the select board wasn't in the room with us. And the select board would, because they would redo their presentation, the select board would say yes, the budget committee saying no, and it was coming to town meeting with a yes from one and a no from the other. More often that was comfortable for the budget committee. And the budget committee people started saying, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going head to head with the select board. This is a big waste of time. I'm out of here. And so when I got onto the board, I suggested to the select board that they attend the meeting and not say anything, but listen to the same presentation. And the presenters would not have a second chance to present. And that seemed to calm everybody down. So that's how we got there. But it was never intended for the select board to interject anything at any time. They would just say to listen.
And I remember, Karen, I was on the board with you when you started that, and it was wonderful. We just sat there and we only listened. Mark?
Yes, having served on the budget committee on a number of years, I agree with Karen on that fact that a lot of times years ago, the budget committee made all these decisions and then they got totally overridden by people who weren't at the meetings. And then this past year, it was almost rubber stamped. Everything that came before the budget committee this past year, the town manager's request was almost always the same. And most of the time, everything went very smoothly. The only area this past year that we had a major difference was in the COVID hit. And the budget committee voted almost unanimously not to give raises to everybody. And then the selectmen immediately overturned that and gave out the raises to all town employees.
Mhm.
That was the only major difference that I saw this past year.
Jean, you're chairman of the budget committee and on it for a number of years. What is your take on this? Do you think it's a fix that needs to be in the charter, or do you think it's a policy management issue, as
I
Lowry
think it's
said?
a policy management issue, actually. The selectmen, by policy or just by, knowing that they're there to listen. And that gives, I mean, if they have questions, the questions could come up when they do their own review.
Mhm.
And they can probably ask someone, the department head, to come in at that point if they really have questions and want answers directly.
Yeah, that was always the intention, is
Right.
that it was to go that way.
So it kind of depends on the chairman of the budget committee and even the chairman of the select board and town manager meeting before the budget committee starts to
They
talk
should all-
about this.
They should all be on the same page, right?
And that's not something we should write in the charter.
No.
I mean,
I mean, that's something the town manager who's there, selectmen might change, the budget committee might change. Hopefully the town manager doesn't change that often. So she can be the one by tradition, if you will, to bring the three together and say, look, let's just figure this out before we go into the meeting.
Right.
so my feeling is that, go ahead. Who is that? Jim?
Is it heresy to ask the question, why do we need a budget committee at all? Karen, why are you laughing? Are asked to spend lots and lots of time for very little influence. And I know it's another set of eyes, and I know it's a town meeting form of government, but it just seems to me that it's a tremendous waste of time. And I've been on it.
Boy,
I'm on, I think, the third time.
Jean.
On one hand, we're talking about the community not being involved in government at all and not being shown an interest and not caring what happens. And here we're saying we don't need them to care what happens. You're right. It always takes a lot of work to get people to come on to the committee. There's no question about that. But if it's covered properly by the press, it gives the voters
What?
An idea of what-
At other,
yes, what were you
sorry.
saying? No, it just gives
I
people
was just,
an
I've just been looking at,
Some other
Pardon?
charters.
I've been looking at some other charters, and it occurs to me that there's another way to do it. And I'm not suggesting they're right and we're not.
What other way?
But
What
it
other way
shouldn't-
would you do
shouldn't
it?
I just wondered that question if we could ever have that question. It isn't our decision whether we have one or not.
I think that some of the towns that you've looked at, and a number of the ones that I've looked at recently, are what they call the hybrid form of government, where it's a town
Yeah.
council town meeting. And the town council has a lot more authority. It's legislative authority that's shared. And I think those are the towns that don't have budget committees.
Right.
The ones that are similar to us, like Kennebunk, they have one, but nobody has one of 21 to 26 people.
Right.
Mark?
Yeah.
Yes, I would like to say that I agree with you, Jim. Why do we need it? Because there's so much of our budget that the budget committee has no say on, for everything from the schools to the personnel to the fire department, personnel, all of the town office personnel, they have no say in. But we do need to have the budget committee there. And I almost think the role should be expanded so they do have a say in some of those things that right now they're just saying, oh no, that's off limits. You can't even talk about it.
Well, I think in the salary side or the costs of personnel side, one of the big issues, one of the things it's hard to touch is the cost of benefits. And I know that that's where that comes in. And I guess the police are
Unionized.
And the contract.
unionized, so we don't have control there. Bob?
Yes,
Bob?
being on both sides, being a chief of the fire department coming into the budget, I enjoyed the budget meetings because I could go back. If they didn't like what I had, I could go back before I met with the selectmen for our final meeting and make some changes. We used to have an awful lot of questions by the
Mhm.
budget committee, which they don't have today in the light they did before.
Is that,
That's because a lot of the people that are on the budget committee don't have the experience to know what questions to ask.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
well, that again then points a little bit to maybe to Jim's point, how can you be effective? Basically, if you don't do your homework or don't have experience working in other areas, maybe on town committees or whatever, to have a little more familiarity with town government. The same,
that-
go ahead, Jim.
That's why when I was chair, we instigated going around to each of the departments and, getting a presentation so that we knew what we were talking about to some extent.
Mhm.
By the time you came around to look at the budget.
Right, before we looked at the budget. So when the budget came to us, we at least had some understanding of how the department worked, what some of their issues were. The chiefs or the department heads would talk about those issues, explain why they've asked for things in the past. So when they came with their proposal, we had a little more knowledge than when we were going in.
That was very helpful. 2 years ago, we met with each of the department heads, months before the budget committee met.
Right,
And got a walkthrough as to town office, opera house, fire department, town garage, sewer department. And the people had a chance to see what was going on and why it was going on.
Mark, did that happen this year there were a lot of newbies.
They did not do it this past year. I don't know why.
Do you think that the budget committee member involvement, asking good questions, will be enhanced because we're now going to allow budget committee members to serve successive terms? So we may have somebody sitting there who's, they're now in their fourth, their fifth, their sixth year of reviewing the budget, and it should be much more understandable to them than it was when they were a rookie.
Yes, I think that'd be much more helpful.
We haven't gotten to this section with the select board. And I think it will be a bit of a hot button issue because I think there's one select board member that thinks that 21 to 26 people is not enough people on a budget committee.
Ooh.
She probably never served on the budget committee nominating committee and
Right.
been trying to drag people out of their houses to volunteer.
Yeah.
But, that's worth bringing that question up, Jim. We can, if we're still meeting by Zoom, you'll be protected. If we're not meeting by Zoom, if we get to meet in public, we'll give you a face shield so the tomatoes can't hit you in the face when you bring up the question.
Oh,
It
I
would
was
not
thinking
be
of
a bad
COVID.
question. It wouldn't be a bad question to ask to get the select board feedback. But I'm of the feeling that they are needed as long as we can continue to have a town meeting form of government. Because I think we do need that other set of eyes and we need to get as much involvement as possible. And it is one way to get citizens involved, but that's a good question to ask next time around. Karen?
I have just one little comment, and it's just my feeling, is I think if you're going to run for selectman, you should serve at least one go-round on the budget committee so you have an understanding of how the town government works and you see the white underbelly. There was a woman in town who wanted to run for select board. She was quite
Oop,
outspoken.
you went away.
Yeah, she was quite outspoken. And I suggested to her she serve on the budget committee first. She came to me after the first year and she said, forget about it. I'm never going to run for select board. Because when she saw what was involved, it didn't look quite so glamorous, It was,
Yeah, interesting. Well, I agree that it would be nice to be able to encourage that for select board members. When people are running, and if there's more than one person running for a seat, that would be something definitely worthwhile having the press ask, what's your prior experience? Have you served on the budget committee? I'm not so sure we can put that qualification in the charter.
I know,
As nice
but
as it would be.
that's just my feeling about it, It would give you some street creds, so to speak.
So are we okay then, sort of keeping our budget committee, the description the way it is now?
Yes.
Fine.
Okay.
Yes, but let me ask this. You mentioned the comment about
Who's that?
21 people on it.
Is that you, Jim?
Well,
No,
where?
it's Mark.
You froze.
Mark,
Where is
Who
that?
was
going-
that? You're all frozen.
What's
Mark.
that?
Did somebody hear somebody say, let me ask this?
yeah, Mark was
Mark.
talking, but his bandwidth
My
is slow. I was getting a message on his bandwidth saying it was slow.
Okay, let me try again. Am I being heard now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Where is it in here and have we come up with it? The idea of 21 members?
Yes, in the, as you have Article 6 now, we talk about it being the 9 plus 2 alternates.
Okay, because we've already discussed that, haven't we?
Yep, we did.
Yeah,
Back
and
now.
they'll be appointed rather than voted on.
No, we
Okay.
have voting, but they're not having to be nominated by a nominated.
Oh, okay, sorry, got confused.
They're
Okay.
filling out an interest form rather than trying to form a nominating committee, which was always as bad as trying to get people to serve on the budget committee.
I thought we had already discussed it, but where you mentioned it earlier, it's like, uh-oh, is that still to come up?
No, it might come up with a select board. It's not coming from us.
Deb, do you know? that
Okay,
that
moving right
select-
along.
Jim was
You
trying,
I want to just
What?
ask, is that select board or board members who is asking for 21 to 27 members ever served on the budget committee?
Yes,
They have.
I believe that person has served on the budget committee. Jean, was she on the budget committee when you were?
Who was this person? You
I
didn't
think
identify.
Allison has commented that she isn't sure that 21 to 26 is enough to be on the budget committee.
No, I'm sorry, who was the person you're talking about?
I think it was Allison that's concerned that maybe
She
what
was
we
on the
have
committee.
20, she was
on the
not?
committee.
She was.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay. So she has been on the budget
Okay.
I
committee.
believe so.
Okey doke. Discussion of Bill Kelly feedback and guidance. We talked a little bit about the new things that came up, but I had sent him the language that we talked about in our earlier meeting in October, I think it was, to add a requirement that the select board actually have a review of the charter on a more frequent basis than every 40 years. And you all have, you got in the mail from Janice, Bill.
you're gone. Deb, you disappeared. Can anybody see her?
I
No.
see her, but I don't hear
Your
anything.
mouth moving.
She's frozen.
Yep, I've
She's
lost her.
frozen.
Yeah, her screen has gone blank for me.
Screen's gone black. She's gone
There
down.
she is.
No,
She's
that's
talking,
Mark.
but there's
She's
nothing
muted
coming
now.
out.
I'm back, sorry.
There we go. Says high winds on top of Mount Batty.
See, you gotta come indoors, Deb.
So anyway, it does not appear that he's saying we shouldn't have it. He's just adding that qualification that we're not saying that the select board on their own can't propose any changes to the charter. I questioned about where I first put it, which was in Article 1. And then I'm just wondering if that's the right place for it. And then I'm wondering actually if it ought to go in the select board section, since it's their responsibility to make sure there's a review of the charter.
Can I make a suggestion here? I think there's a couple small paragraphs that we're trying to figure out where they go in the whole charter. Let's wait until we're through all the charter review, and then we decide where they go. As long as we agree that the language in that paragraph is good language and we want to keep it, because I think we're going to come up with 2 or 3 of these things. And maybe once we're all done and we
Okay.
finally hear the rest of the comments from the select board, we can decide where they go.
So is everybody okay with Bill Kelly's addition then to charter review?
Yes.
Yeah.
And on the personnel board, he's just done some sort of clarifying language. He's added some of their qualifications, added to their qualifications that they should have some familiarity with relations between employees and employers, knowledge of personnel administration and compensation methods. Anyway, I think that that's all excellent. And I think particularly by adding those qualifications, it definitely means that they're people that probably ought to be appointed. We have them currently elected, but we're revising in the charter to make them appointed. And if we're adding those, what I think are pretty fairly serious qualifications, I'm not so sure it ought to be an elective office. That's my take, but
Are you talking personnel board?
talking about the personnel board, because he's added some extra qualifications about what knowledge you have.
I think too, now that we've greatly reduced the role of the personnel board so that it's advisory in nature,
Yeah.
they're no longer making decisions. Maybe we should call it the personnel committee. Because typically in town, boards, which are the ZBA, the planning board, the select board, make decisions that bind the town to some extent. Committees provide advice to a variety of other organizations. So maybe we should just call this the personnel committee. And I would agree with what Deb said about having them appointed, because that way the select board can verify that they've got these qualifications that Bill has suggested.
Reaction?
By calling it
I
a committee, by
agree with that.
definition, does it have to be in the charter?
That's right.
It does. I would not think it does.
Yeah, because we've got language in there that says the select board is allowed to create committees from time to time as they deem appropriate.
Okay, if we take this out of the charter altogether, the section, one of the last articles that we have is called transition, where we talk about what happens. Yep, I'll get you. Let me finish my sentence and I'll get to you, Bob. Because the current board is elected, I don't think we can just eliminate them. They'd have to serve out their terms, I think, and that's a BK question. But we could remove it from the charter and then say that the committee, the personnel board shall morph into a committee appointed by the select board once people have filled out their terms. We could do that. Bob, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I did. The Board of Selectmen and the Personnel Board don't always agree. So if they're going to be appointed by the selectmen, they're not going to appoint anybody that
Isn't
doesn't
going
agree with them.
Yeah.
So you're taking the people aspect out of that.
Well, one of the things to my mind, now I've never served on the personnel board, because we now have this very extensive employee personnel and procedures manual. How the employees are handled is now governed by that manual and not as much by the personnel board. But I see what you're saying. That would happen if the budget committee were appointed by the select board. It could be the same. It could be the same thing.
Right.
If we leave the personnel board as a personnel committee in the charter, well, I don't know. Never mind. I was going to say, if we leave them in the charter, does it give them more teeth, even if we call them a committee?
Question,
Yes,
Deb.
Mark.
What article and section are we talking about for personnel board?
Okay, there, I think it's Article 4, administration. Article 4, administrative organization, Part A is personnel administration. That's in the draft from October 17th.
Okay, yep,
And the first thing it does is it talks about the policy about employee fairness. And then we have the personnel director, and then we have the personnel board. So that's in administrative organization 4. And the advisory role that we all like the language of was actually written by the personnel board. So they sort of recognize themselves that they're an advisory group more than a decision-making group. And let's see. Let's see if there's anything. Well, what do you all think about what Bob was saying about we're changing it to being appointed, not elected? We already had voted on that once, but this can be discussed again, and certainly will probably be discussed with the select board. And what is y'all's reaction to the change to appointed? Do you want to revisit that?
I do. I think Bob has a really good point here that this could wind up being, a bunch of friends all pointed in the same direction and maybe not be as fair as it would be if it was an elected group.
How does anybody else feel?
I think in the past, it's been very difficult to get people to, come on the personnel board. I know when Don was involved in it a couple of years ago, it was like pulling teeth to even get someone to run.
Mhm.
Well, actually, we had 2 write-ins this time. 2 people who run one election
Running
by being
write-in.
write-in candidates.
Well, that's a good, that's good.
But what do you do if a write-in candidate doesn't satisfy the criteria in the charter? Doesn't have the experience in personnel.
Based upon what Bill Kelly's suggesting.
Yeah, then even if they win, are they disqualified? I think that's part of the problem. If you're going to say that candidates must have 3 of the following 5 levels of experience to contend, and that's real easy for a select board to verify whether or not they have those experiences. Much tougher for voters, and if there's a write-in, nobody knows whether or not they have those experiences. I think in terms of whether or not the select board would disagree with the personnel committee, number one, personnel committee is only there as an advisory role to work on tasks as assigned by the select board and the town manager. They're not there to develop their own personnel policies independently and go to the select board and say, here, I think we should do this, that, and the other thing. Additionally, if you've got select board members who every year we're supposed to turn over at least 1 select board member. Every year you turn over at least one member of the personnel committee. So, for each of the 3 years that a personnel committee committee member might serve, you're going to have a different group of people doing the appointments unless the select board is stagnant in terms of the people over a 3-year period.
And the other thing about how the personnel board operates now is they can make recommendations to the select board for changes to the personnel policies. And the select board then votes on that before it goes into the policy manual. It's not the personnel board, even today, that makes the decision to put something in the policy manual.
Mhm.
It goes from the personnel board to the select board, and they vote on it before it goes in the policy manual. So I think whether we have them as a committee or a board, that chain of command is not going to change. I personally, I think it's fine for them to be appointed by the select board. Shall we keep it as is till we go through both another meeting with the select board and discussions with hopefully the personnel board themselves and the public? I mean,
Yeah.
that's all open for discussion. Do you want to accept Bill's increased qualifications, or do you want to leave those aside?
There's some way of watering them down a little bit, but with the same indication. I mean, it certainly would help if someone were, like a human resource person or as opposed
We
to somebody.
And we currently say, should be persons experienced and familiar with the principles and techniques of personnel administration on the merit basis, except for the town employee member.
We're saying the
think-
same thing as he's saying, watered down.
Yeah, I think that requiring somebody to be on the personnel board to have experience with fixed step methods of compensation is a little much.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's a really technical thing to know about. And I know that we have steps. I guess we do have steps for our salaries, but I'm not so sure you need, my opinion, I think that's pretty heavy requirement.
Do we know if any of the current members of the personnel board can satisfy these requirements?
I think so. I think there's one, it might even be the newest member.
Karen?
But all three of them, can all three of them satisfy these requirements?
Not now, I don't think so.
Because I think one thing, I don't think we want to come up with a list of qualifications. This is in support of what Gene is saying, is I don't think we come up with a list of qualifications that create such a sophisticated person that we don't have enough of them to satisfy, to fill the committee.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think is it Kathy Painter-Landis you're talking about, or who's one of the other new members this year?
I remember Don saying something to the effect, and I can't remember who it was now. Oh, that's good because they've had experience. But I honestly don't remember which person it was.
Do we have 5 members of the personnel board now?
Yes, I believe
We
so.
do. We've always consistently had that number of people.
Yes.
I
Town report lists 5.
I would like, okay with you all. I think chairs can, pardon?
The town
You
report
checking-
lists 5 members.
We vote for 4 and the town votes for 4 and the employees vote for 1?
No, one of them is the town manager.
Currently. I don't
Yeah,
have
no,
my,
well, under the charter, there's going to be 3 either appointed or elected people, the town manager and then the employee representative.
right. But currently, I don't know what the current, I've lost the current.
The
Yes.
town report lists 3 members, and then it says 1 appointed member, and then 1 employee representative.
Yeah, currently, we have 5, 3 are elected by the town, 1 by the employees and the town,
Manager.
and the town managers. You're right. So all we're doing is changing the count. We're not changing the count. We're just changing from elected to appointed on everybody.
Right.
What do you all think about removing the qualification for knowing compensation methods on Bill's proposed language?
I think the comment that you're asking for the people who are on that committee to be so sophisticated that you're going to run out of possible members very quickly.
I think we can eliminate that.
Okay. And knowledge of personnel administration is important. I don't know if we need the word techniques. Knowledge of personnel administration, techniques. So let's say this says members on the personnel committee, except for the town employee member, should be persons experienced and familiar with the principles and practices of relations between employees and employers, knowledge of personnel administration, and the merit business. Sentence doesn't make sense. Shall be considered during appointments.
How about just ending it with the word administration?
There you go. Members of the Personnel Committee, except for the town employee member, should be persons experienced and familiar with the principles and practices of relations between employees and employers and knowledge of personnel administration. Because personnel administration includes salary decisions
Yeah.
Right.
and reviews, all of that. Okay. Do we need a motion or do that by consensus?
The motion that we edit the number 1 under A, appointments and terms as read by Deb.
Second.
Second, anybody?
Yeah, well, I
Second.
heard a second from Lowry. Any other discussion on the qualifications? Mark?
Yes, as I'm looking at it now, in the current town book, it lists the personnel committee. It does not list the town manager as a member of that committee. So we are adding her or him or whoever it happens to be into that as being part of that committee. Is that correct?
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, you know what it says? It's appointed by the select board. We're changing that to town manager from one appointed by the select board. The current
Okay.
charter says,
Three elected, 1 appointed, and 1 town employee. That's what it says now. We're
right,
changing it to 3 appointed, the town manager, and 1 elected by the
employees,
employees.
correct.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to revise the qualifications. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
I
Opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, okey doke. Great. Thank you. Next. The Bill Kelly's memo about emergency ordinances and remote meetings. We talked a little bit about this. My impression is that he's basically saying, don't get ahead of what the state is authorizing municipalities to do.
Mhm.
He went into great detail, which I thought was interesting, about the remote meetings and remote participation. That was kind of educational. But again, he's basically saying, wait to see what the legislature does rather than trying to put it in the charter without any guidance from the legislature.
Mhm.
Is that it? Is that what other people kind of take away from it?
Yes.
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 Lowry, you there?
Yes. Yes.
The screen's frozen, Deb. Can you still hear us? Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, Karen.
I
Okay,
hear Karen. Yeah.
we've lost
I-
Deb.
You've lost Deb.
Yeah,
I don't know where she went.
her screen froze and now it's black.
Yeah. Yep.
Now she's
You're the
gone
host
completely.
now, Laurie.
I don't know. Okay. Well, Bob, when you go up to the top of the hill to light the star, take a look for Deb. Oh, there she is.
Well,
She's back,
Unmute
she-
yourself, Deb.
but she's muted.
She is? Where is she? I don't see her.
Yeah, she's up. She's right next to Mark.
She's next to Bob.
Sorry.
She's below Mark.
It's my internet. What did you guys decide while I was gone?
Congratulations. You get to finish it yourself.
We just sent out a search party for you, Deb. We didn't do anything more, okay?
One of the things that we talked with Bob a little bit about was this idea of how do we handle remote meetings, and we certainly understand and support Bill's reluctance to go out and try to write some kind of way to do this ahead of any direction from the state, because the state really needs to take the lead in this. But if you look through, one of his comments is that the state is not taking a proactive lead in this; they are taking a reactive lead in this. And I got the impression that that means the direction from the state in regards to remote meetings could be several years away, because it's going to take the state, as they do, they don't move very quickly. It's going to take them a while to write this stuff up and then have it vetted by all the various town managers. And Sue, I mean, Bill had mentioned on that one conference call we had that he was involved in a Zoom meeting with like 65 town managers and the MMA at the same time, or town attorneys, excuse me, and the MMA at the same time. This is going to be a long time for them to figure out how to handle this. So it would be really presumptive on our part to try to do something. And I don't think Bill would endorse it. I don't think he would say it's okay to have it in the charter.
And I think this is probably good backup for the select board to know about. And I imagine that, you know, Bill Kelly may have shared this with the select board. If not, I may pass this information on to Bob Falciani, because there's some members of the select board that are really eager to continue to do remote meetings, perhaps even after and have participation even after pandemic is over with. So I think I'll pass this information on to the select board. It might be helpful to them. Does anybody feel like, yes, Mark?
Is any of this in our current charter, or is this something that you're considering new to add to it? And if it is, then where is it?
There really isn't anything. This came out of our meeting with the select board. They were talking about wishing that they could have done more things. It goes back to that question of them wanting authority during emergencies. So this came up in our discussion with the select board and the Opera House on the 28th. We do have emergency ordinance language in the current charter in the select board section, but the only thing they're really allowed to do is to shorten up the requirement for public notice before a town meeting before they pass an ordinance under an emergency. It doesn't allow the select board to pass any ordinances without a town meeting. It just shortens up the public notice aspect of it. And I think the select board was a little frustrated that when the lockdown happened and you couldn't have any in-person meetings in the beginning, they couldn't do things. But then, as Bill Kelly kind of says, in the early part of the pandemic, there were problems with other towns, people trying to pass things right away that, well, he qualified them as cowboys. So it's not in our current language. Nothing terribly broad is in our current charter. The select board is really limited on what they can do. However, he talks about what the health officer can do. And he's drafting a letter that makes it clear what the powers are that a health officer can do in a state of emergency.
Do you think that the selectmen were talking more fiscal issues in an emergency, making some decisions as opposed to what the health officer could do?
Probably, you may be right. But in our conversation with Bob, it seemed to me that they had that flexibility with their contingency fund, which, Mark, as you remember, Mark, you guys voted more for the contingency fund because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
No, I agree, but I'm saying I didn't, that really wasn't contingency. I don't remember that being brought up at the meeting with selectmen. But you're
No,
right,
it wasn't.
they already have that, the money available.
They did. Anything else on emergency ordinances and remote meetings? Okay, I'll just pass that on to Bob Falciani in case he hasn't already gotten it from Bill Kelly. So we need to have another meeting ourselves, and we need to have another meeting with the select board. I know this is, we're coming down to crunch time, and we're also coming into holiday season. So I know this is getting to be a tough time of year.
Deb,
Yes, Mark.
at one of the select board meetings that I listened to recently, there was a short discussion about different committees and what the committees were supposed to be doing and the time frame for turning it in, such as the charter committee, and being able to extend out things where it may say it has to be done within a certain number of days, but because of this pandemic, things have changed dramatically. And I think that they are aware of it. And I think the state is also aware that a lot of these things will not meet the deadlines that were supposed to be met.
Yeah, it's possible for us to ask for another extension. We had, in order to get on the June 2021 ballot, we would need to have this to the select board on March, by the end of March, which means we have to have at least one public information meeting, which I'm still at a loss on how we would accomplish that with the current situation. And because the select board has voted as recently as last week, no in-person meetings, which is why we're meeting by Zoom.
Mhm.
I think it would be worth our while to try to schedule another meeting with the select board, and then sort of get a read on how much more work we have to do before we ask for an extension. I really am not eager about drawing this out till November of 2021. I mean, I don't think we're that far away from having a draft that can go out to the public. What do you guys think? I mean, we're really kind of hit every article.
I think we're pretty much right on schedule, except for that public information meeting. That's going to trip us up, and that might mean it doesn't go on the June ballot. We might not be ready to have a public meeting. You
We
know?
might not be able to.
Right, we might not be able to. So I think next time we meet with the select board that we mention this to them and see if there's any reason that they feel we can't push it out until November.
Yeah.
Well, we've only reviewed about half of the charter with the select board. That's all we were able to get to the previous meeting. So we're going to have another entire meeting dedicated to the second half of the charter, let alone the parts that we were still unresolved on, or there's maybe some disagreement or some new ideas floated around. So we have to do that. Maybe this is just me, but I've had conversations with several people that if you look on the front page of the Village Soup, there was a public meeting in Owl's Head within the last couple of days where 46 people attended in full masks, social distancing, to talk about some issues with the airport. Why is it that Owl's Head says it's okay to meet and Camden is like, oh, no, we can't possibly have 11 people in the same room as large as the Opera House to have a meeting? I'm going to write, my representatives and suggest that they start to be a little bit more reasonable about letting people who are acting in this very safe fashion follow all the guidelines. But there's no state guideline that says we can't meet in the Opera House with a limited number of people. And that would be a way that we'd be able to have a public meeting. People might have to queue up to come in if we had multiple people that wanted to come and comment, but at least they could come in person and ask their questions. Lord knows how you would get, if we had half a dozen people from the public that wanted to come in and ask questions, I don't have any idea how you would get them to participate in a Zoom meeting and be heard and have an opportunity to say what they feel.
I know that the planning board has figured out some way to do that, Lowry, and I might have a conversation with Jeremy, but I think having a public hearing where 30, 40 people could participate via Zoom is way beyond my capabilities.
Yeah. Well, and what do you do with people that don't have computers? I mean, you know, just in our group, Nancy and John don't participate because they don't have the computer capability. There's bound to be other citizens out there that don't have computer capability.
So why don't we have that as one of our topics with the select board? Yes, Mark.
Question. One of the concerns, I believe, with the Opera House is because of spreading people out in all those seats, the cleanup before and after is a difficult situation. What facility do we have in town now, such as the gymnasium in the old high school? Is there a new gymnasium big enough in the new middle school to have a meeting in a gymnasium type room where you can have chairs spread out, you know, folding chairs that are easier to clean afterwards?
Good idea.
That's an excellent idea. So do you want to try to have our next meeting be with the select board to talk about how to have public meetings? See if we can have it with them in the Opera House rather than trying to have 11 people on my Zoom on our computer screens. And I will admit to being very nervous about trying to do that. We all work together long enough where we're reasonable in a group, but double the size, and
Find it in a room big enough to seat everybody far enough apart, but not the seats of the Opera House. I think that's the difficult part.
Okay, okie doke. So what do you think about?
I think the question might be is that we have to have an area which we can either, which we can do YouTube.
Oh,
And I don't know if you can do YouTube in the gym.
Well, I would think that they would have Wi-Fi capabilities in the high school or in the middle school.
I don't know. I mean, they might, but you know, in one of the meeting rooms or in the auditorium, but not necessarily in the gym. That's just a question to ask.
okay. So do you want to have a meeting just between us, or do you want to go straight to our next meeting being with the select board?
Go to the select board again.
Okay. So, do you want to try, oh, shoot. Today is the 18th of November. Next week is out. It's Thanksgiving week, even though everybody's will be a little bit, do you want to shoot for the first week in December with a select board? That would be December 2nd.
That's 2 weeks from today.
Yep.
I don't know if that's giving them enough time to plan.
About the 9th? Well, let's see, they meet on the, so
First
how
and
about the
third.
9th? 9th of December?
Yeah, that's good.
Works for me.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
All right, well, let's try and see if we can get the select board to join us the 9th of September.
Yeah, that would be
Ninth.
nice.
December.
December 9th. And I'm going to push for the Opera House again. Does that work for you all?
That works for me.
Yeah.
All right, Bob, thank you. And I think it would for John. I don't think Nancy, but Nancy might be able to call in if we had one of our computers up for Zoom. All right, is there, oh, one other thought. I'm trying to write an article that could go in the newspaper to tell people that we actually are still working on this. And what I'll try to do is have it to you all to take a look at, if you want to take a look at it, maybe certainly the week before our next meeting. So I'll get something to you all by a proposed letter that I'll write by the December 2nd. Does that sound good to you all, and we can get feedback?
Yep.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
All righty, so that means 12-2 for the letter. Okey doke. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So,
All in favor? I thank you all so very, very much. And I'm going to, I have to do something here to,
Press end meeting.
You want
Yeah,
to end
press-
Zoom, not Zoom, but
it says view
YouTube.
stream. Oh, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Do I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Okay,
Yeah.
I thank you all so very, very much. And I'm going to try. I failed. I have to do something here to.
Press end meeting.
I tried.
Zoom, not Zoom, but
It says view
YouTube,
stream.
YouTube,
Oh,
Deb.
that wasn't what I wanted to do. Do I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Okay, and I thank you all so very, very much.
There you are again. If we all leave the meeting.
Everybody end the meeting. I have to do something here
I think you just have to act out of it, Deb, and it'll be gone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
YouTube, YouTube, Deb.
I lost Zoom.
Everybody can just hit leave meeting and we're out.
There you are again. If we all leave the meeting.
Everybody end the meeting. I have to do something
I
here
think you just have to act out of it, Deb, and it'll be gone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
YouTube.